Welcome to the 16th Annual World Community Conference sponsored by Project Dragon, the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. We are all so excited to have you here today. I'm Katie Kylan. If those of you that were at graduation, you might know me from the rest of the 365 days of the year. I actually teach at Project Dragonfly, and I'm so fortunate to read all the amazing things that you all do every day. So quick hand, so we know who's in the room. How many people graduated yesterday? Round of applause for all those people. We've done all those projects, so we know how much work it took to walk across that stage. We're so fortunate. How many current students do we have? Awesome. You can do it. How many family and friends? Public? Great. So I'm so happy to look out at a room of faces rather than icons. And we have some really great and exciting presentations that we want to share with our community today. So to start off, we have someone who has worn various roles, from a student to an EE facilitator to an AIP partner, and also is representing this great facility of Cincinnati. So without further ado, Molly O'Neill.
Hey everybody, welcome to the zoo. As Katie mentioned, I'm Molly O'Neill, and I run like volunteer, intern, zoo team, community engagement, community service programs here. So I work with a ton of folks who are basically our unpaid staff that keep this crazy train on the tracks. So working here, there's one thing that I've learned, and that is you start every single presentation with cute animals. So we're just gonna get that going. So this is Theo, who is our newest addition, our baby giraffe. We've got Lucille, who is our baby binturong. Little baby Chris. And Chris's best bud Remus, who's a rescue dog. And then of course the obligatory Fiona photos, because you are here at the Cincinnati Zoo where Fiona the famous hippo was born. She's gotten a lot bigger, she's still very cute and sassy. And then it wouldn't be me if I didn't include some of the babies that I love so much as well. So, the little baby Zinnia, which they grow up so fast and they reach sexual maturity in like no time at all. Some of our little zoo friends that just arrived here without us having to bring them, because we've created this beautiful, awesome habitat in our urban landscape. They also grow up really fast and still surprise and delight our visitors as much as the animals that are technically under our care. We've got the silly ones, we've got the magnificent ones, we've got the curious ones, the gorgeous ones, the ones who were clearly made to be Pixar characters. And then we have some of my favorite species, which are the humans and our fellow biophiliacs. So together making some pretty magical moments. And this kind of stuff is happening at zoos all over the country. Getting people up close and personal with nature and wildlife. So when I think about what Project Dragonfly has brought to my life, and what I'm the most grateful for about this program, is that I found my people. And I found a place where all of these people come and they connect with wildlife, and they connect with nature, and they help them become better environmental stewards and future conservationists. So it's brought a ton of things to my life. I also say phrases I never thought I would say, like, I wonder what the sample size was on that. I'm very careful to state these data instead of this data. And then I would caution you, if you end up doing things like this when your friends and family make broad general statements, if you ask them if they've dug into the literature on that, maybe avoid that. But those are some of the things that Dragonfly has brought to my life, as well as an appreciation for participatory education and fun activities. So we're going to do a little bit of that, and I'm going to have you participate in a fun little techie activity. I hope, cross your fingers, back to presentations. But I want you to get out your smartphones. And those of you in the front row, you might be able to just scan the QR code up here. Otherwise, you can just go to menti.com and then enter that code at the top. And then I'm going to ask you a question. What has Project Dragonfly brought to your life? And I want you to just put any words that come into your mind. You can submit multiple times. It's just the one question. Put in a word. Submit, submit, submit. And we're only going to do this for about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and just sort of see where this goes. Time's up. That's pretty amazing, you guys. I love it. Don't worry, Chris, I can download this as a PDF. So these are some incredible words and some ones that definitely came to my mind when I think about Project Dragonfly also. One of the ones that I'm sure is on here somewhere, but community being the biggest one, which is also related, is the other thing that I'm so grateful for is the sense of scale and community that this program has brought, not just to me, but to the entire planet. I love this image because it really shows you just how powerful this program is. You guys are those red balloons all over the world. A lot. That's a lot of passion, that's a lot of energy, that's a lot of skill, that's a lot of knowledge. And all those red balloons and all of you are carriers of all of those words that came up in that word cloud. Those are words you hold in your heart. That's who you've become. That's who you're becoming because of this program. And I use carrier instead of contagion. Stick with me here. But one of the reasons why I ended up talking about this today was because a couple weeks ago I was watching a PBS special. Because we all have PBS when we're science nerds. And it was all about violence and how big cities were applying these really neat epidemiology, sort of mitigation of infectious disease methods to halting violence. And they kept showing these maps of these sort of epicenters or hotspots, like this one singular event that sort of started this huge movement, in this case, this violence, and they were using infectious disease methods, and I generally think of Dragonfly folks as not very violent, not very healthy. But the concept is still the same, is that one little thing has the ability to spread very, very far and wide. And all of these maps that they kept showing, I just kept coming back to this map and thinking about the power of Dragonfly as like a change agent mechanism. Here's a map of just the United States, and here's all of you guys and those red balloons and this giant network and this giant community of people who are all connected in one way or another. Cheers to Chris and Lynn Myers for choosing to connect this amazing program with zoos. Because as you can see here, some of these sort of hubs of lots and lots and lots of dragonflies are around some of the zoos that are here in this country. Zoos are incredibly powerful places with an amazing, amazing reach. So well done, great strategy. And these are some of the numbers that I thought would be worth highlighting when we talk about connecting people through Dragonfly and zoos. We have over 200 accredited AZA institutions in this country that employ over 200,000 people who greet and reach and connect and educate and inspire over 2 million people just in this country alone. So the partnership with zoos, the reach really is absolutely astounding. That's just AZA. I'm not talking about how many of you are classroom teachers bringing it every day, doing that hard work too. So in general, this program and the network that it has created is really something special. And you are a big, big part of that. So as carriers of this sort of infectious passion and knowledge and skill, and now street cred because you are masters, and you get to say you have this special degree. Get out there and keep doing it. This is the stuff that gives me such hope, and that I'm so proud of this program. It's a really big part of it. Because if you look at this, man, we got this, you guys. Like, all of the big things that we're out there fighting for, you have such an amazing network of people. So we got this. Keep going. And I think it's time to hear from some students who are a part of this amazing epidemic of change makers in ecological and social change. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
That was wonderful. So, I wear a lot of different hats, partly because I work in the tropics and I have this curly hair, so I have to keep the hair down. But also I've had a lot of jobs and have had lots of experiences. But the one thing that unifies, so I can't sit in a room full of former students and other people and not get an assignment. So, you think that you are done. You are not done. Project Dragonfly has 3 core principles. Inquiry, community, and voice. And so we are going to see a diversity of presentations that touch some of the different aspects of the amazing plethora of projects that we have. And so as you're there absorbing all these projects, I want you to keep these 3 words in the back of your mind and think about how these presentations touch on those 3 words. And so, without further ado, we are going to start off with Chris, and he's going to talk about communication with technologies across AZA institutions.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Corpus. I am a recent graduate as of yesterday. I'm also the audiovisual production manager at the Aquarium Pacific in Long Beach, California. I am the documentary filmmaker there, and I oversee all of our educational video production as well. And I love conservation, and I love this program so much. This master's program really excited me because I wanted to expand my ability to understand conservation better and get some experience out in the field, but also wanted to broaden my reach as far as conservation storytelling and improve what my workplace does with their conservation storytelling as well. And so all of the work that I really try to focus on related to communication technologies and investigating how we can use it better in conservation storytelling. The first one that I started to study in my first year was about podcasts. Several of you have probably heard podcasts because 2017, 67 million people were listening to podcasts monthly. For those who don't know what a podcast is, they are basically a radio-style show that you can listen to on your digital device, whether it's your phone, your tablet, your computer, and they can be all sorts of things. They can be documentary style, they can be interview shows, they can be fictional programming, they can be radio theater. It's a wide gamut of things that podcasts can, storytelling that podcasts can utilize, and a lot of people listen to them on all sorts of devices. iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and even a lot of companies use their own websites to host podcasts as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can reach people. And I was tasked with trying to create a podcast for my institution, and I didn't really know where to start. So I thought, oh, I'll use some projects of work to try and investigate how we could do that better. So when I started trying to build an inquiry project, I was looking at what sort of conservation stories should we try to focus on. And I was thinking that, let's talk about the conservation stories that are happening around the world and what my aquarium is connected to. And will that be exciting for people? Will people care about that? So I wanted to study and see if external conservation stories actually equal a higher subscriber base. And I went and investigated all 231 AZA institutions, which was a lot more time consuming than I thought it was going to be. But it also ended up being very surprising because only 15 at the time claimed to have a podcast, which I thought was shocking when there's 67 million people listening to podcasts. But it turned out only three zoos or aquariums had a podcast that was actively running and doing conservation storytelling. And I was shocked by that. It also meant I didn't have enough data to really do a good project. But I was able to do a great discussion afterwards. And it also kind of kept me, so I had to do a lot more work, and I still haven't finished the podcast work in my institution, but it helped me start a big process of research for what we were going to need to do to try and make something really engaging for people. And that led to me looking into social media as well. We had lots of conversations about the best way to use social media to talk about conservation. And we were arguing about, you want to make an entertainment post, get people excited about it. You want to make an educational post, they walk away with something. But no one really had proof of which one was going to be better. So I thought, okay, let's do another little study. And I wanted to figure out if entertainment posts got more engagement than educational posts or not. And engagement, by the way, is likes, shares, retweets, all those types of things that people do when they're engaging or interacting with a social media post. 81% of the US population in 2017 was using social media, and that number has only gone up. So we know that it's out there. The ones that I looked to study were Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, because of the top 5, they were the only ones that had historical data that you could publicly go back and try and research and analyze. And what I started to discover was that zoos and aquariums only have 3 types of posts that they really create. The first is an educational type post, which is something like this, where they're trying to share some specific information about a species or about a conservation issue, and it may or may not work. And then there are entertainment ones that don't have a specific educational message, don't have a specific advertising message. I call them the boop photos. If you see my aquarium, we've got lots of otter close-ups on their noses, and they call that the boop photo. Right. Just there to engage, just there to get people interested in looking at something, but no real take there. And the third category that I found was advertising. And that was mostly specific messages where people, or where the institutions, were trying to inform about upcoming events or about ticket specials and sales. This was a pretty big study as well, 233 AZA institutions, and I decided to focus on aquariums because that's where I worked and wanted to see how that related to me. And I couldn't study all of them because that was way too much, so I chose the top 6 and the bottom 6 as far as social media following goes, and analyzed every single post that they made over the month of September, which was also a bad choice, because there was so much to look at. And it came up with a lot of cool stuff, though. Over 1 million engagements were found across those 12 institutions. They had 242 advertisement posts, which were about 117 engagements, 392 educational posts, which was about 306,000 engagements. But this was the really fascinating thing. There's only, 14 more posts for entertainment, but they doubled their engagements with people. 687,000. It's more than education and advertisement put together. And that really told us, yeah, obviously, entertainment is the one we need to focus on. But really, how can we take that entertainment, how can we get people as excited about entertainment posts that include some sort of storytelling and some sort of messaging that really gets them interested in an educational side of that topic as well, whatever the conservation issue was that we're trying to reflect. And I did all this work and all these other projects, and really in the end I was like, well, who cares? I'm going to try and do a talk at a conference about this stuff, but I thought it was interesting, but not many people might find it interesting. But man, so many people are using technology, and we are a nature-based organization, a conservation-based organization, Project Dragonfly. We're all excited about being outdoors and getting out into it and getting people excited about being out in it. But 223 million people are using social media. 90 million people right now are listening to podcasts monthly. That's a huge opportunity to connect with people and find ways to engage them deeper. And the research tells us that the higher engagement that you get, so the more of those entertainment posts that you can get, the more support your institution is going to have for the conservationist issues that you're trying to promote. And then with the podcasting, the more varied of a podcast that you're starting to create, the more likely you're going to have continual followers and growth of followers who would hopefully become more and more interested in the science and conservation that you're representing. Technology matters, entertainment matters, and with all of that, with the unique efforts and ideas that we can come up with, we can come up with some really cool things to engage people even further. Those were broad strokes for sure. There's a lot more detail that I'd be happy to talk with you more, but I don't have that much time. So you can find me at the Aquarium of the Pacific. I'm on all the social medias. That's my email up there, clcorpus@gmail.com, and I'm starting a website production called hiddennature.org, and you can follow us there as well. There's citations because this is a research-based thing that we're doing. And that's what I wanted to share.
For our discussion/questions, but we have time for one question right now if anyone has something pressing to ask Chris.
Does Project Dragonfly have a podcast?
Podcast. That's a great question. I don't know. Chris, does Project Dragonfly?
It's in the works.
So someday 90 million people will be listening to Project Dragonfly.
We're waiting for study to be finished to know
It's on my to-do list if I pass this test.
Yeah, we'll get down there with the mic so we can get on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we are going to stay in the zoo and aquarium world now, but talk about a very important topic of diversity. So we're going to have Melinda come up now.
How's it going? All right, so yeah, I'm Melinda. I work at Point Defiance Zoo and Aquarium in Tacoma, Washington, and I work in conservation leadership development. And I'm here to talk to you guys today about the state of diversity in the zoo and aquarium industry. And the reason this is what I'm talking to you about today is because in my time in the Dragonfly program, I'm also a graduate of my time in the Dragonfly program, my master plan was advancing diversity and inclusion in the zoo and aquarium industry to better serve our conservation missions. And really what I mean by that is like, hey, look, if we as zoos are serious about conservation, we cannot afford to leave anyone behind, and we need to practice conservation in a way that is as inclusive as possible. So throughout my time in the program, I'm writing lots of papers because this is my focus on things like representation and cultural competence in education. And I would often put statements like this in my paper, and then I would write it up, put it on the Dragonfly workshop, submit it for peer comments, and almost always when I had a statement like this in one of my papers, I would get the exact same peer comment, which was, do you have a citation for this? What an interesting question. Let me tell you about that. Here's the problem. Now, if you work in the zoo and aquarium industry, you are probably aware that there is a general consensus that we are not diverse, especially when it comes to racial and ethnic representation. We know who we go to work with every day. We know who we see at zoo conferences. We know who our other friends in the zoo and aquarium industry. We know, generally, it feels pretty boring, right? AZA, for its part, has also acknowledged that this is an issue. This is something that we really need to work on, and it's going to be essential for our success. But there is very little publicly available data that actually demonstrates this or gives us any meaningful data. Now, there are some things that we do know that I could cite in my papers. So, for example, we know that white people are overrepresented in environmental jobs in general, especially in leadership positions. We know that this is true, even though people of color are receiving advanced degrees in the environmental sphere at increasing rates and are more likely to support environmental causes. We know that when we do tend to hire more diversely in the environmental sector, retention and satisfaction rates for employees of color are a lot lower, and we tend not to keep them. And we know at the visitor level that the most common attribute for a visitor of all cultural attractions, including zoos and aquariums, is being white and non-Hispanic. At the same time, we also know the demographics of the United States are shifting and we are becoming increasingly less white. What we don't know specifically is how does this apply to the zoo and aquarium world specifically, right? Because we are a little bit of like the quirky odd duck when it comes to like the environmental sector, right? We have some unique challenges and some unique things about us. But if we don't have this data, we can't establish a baseline for how we're actually doing. If we don't establish a baseline, we can't set any meaningful goals, and then we're never going to be able to demonstrate that we're doing any better or analyze why we are not, which means we need data. So this is where I want to talk to you about two projects that I did specifically focusing on racial and ethnic representation in the zoo and aquarium world. So project one, who is conservation for? How are white and non-white people represented in on-site conservation messaging at zoos and aquariums? So I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I went to 3 AZA facilities in my area. I walked up the grounds, I looked at all of the signs, and then I focused specifically on signs that had a conservation message. And I looked for, is there a person in this sign? Are they white or are they not white? Are they represented positively or negatively? And what geographic area is this conservation message pertinent to? And what I found was that, in general, white and non-white people were both portrayed positively overall. So we didn't have a situation where, like, the white people were always doing good stuff and the non-white people were always doing bad stuff. So that's good, right? But what I also found was that when you look at the number of conservation messages that were pertinent to places like Africa, Latin America, Asia, places where the population is majority non-white, white people were still overrepresented in positive conservation roles. And over again, when I was looking at all of these signs, I would see a picture like this. Now, in this picture, everyone here is being represented positively. They're all doing something good for conservation, right? They're either teaching or learning, right? So this is great, this is wonderful. But if we deconstruct this picture a little bit more, we can see that what we're looking at is, here's the representative of the zoo or the conservation project, typically white, and is doing something really active. And then we have the non-white people who are generally portrayed more passively, but are also nationals of another country. They are not from the United States. So if I'm a student of color, I'm coming to the zoo, and the only people that I'm seeing on signs for conservation are students in Tanzania, am I really getting the message that I have a voice or a role to play in conservation? So this led me to my second project. I was like, okay, who are we saying actually does this work? Who works at the zoo? So, are white people more likely to be represented as zoo employees in zoo media and marketing materials? So for this project, I expanded my scope a little bit. I looked at 11 zoos and aquariums all over the United States. I looked at websites, I looked at a sampling of YouTube videos, and I looked at the AZA Pizzazz Reel for the last 4 years. So again, I was looking for, is there an employee represented here? Are they white or non-white? What type of job are they represented in? Specifically, is it mission or conservation related? And you'll never guess. Yes, white people are significantly more likely to be portrayed as zoo employees in all of the media types that I examined to a highly significant degree. This is the proper way to denote, I had to look it up because my significance was like 0.000000000. So, very significant, right? And this was true not only when you looked at all of the data together at the national level, it was true when you looked at each individual zoo, right? So at each individual zoo, white employees were overrepresented in comparison to their regional demographics, right? So nobody was immune. White people were more likely to be shown basically in all types of roles. And visitor representation was more on par. So I also looked at visitor representation, and visitor representation did seem to match up a lot more with both national and regional demographics. So it seems like we're taking care to make sure that we're representing our visitors in a way that is, representative of our communities. But again, and that's good, that's positive, right? But again, if you're a person of color and you are only seeing yourself at the zoo as a user of the zoo, and not somebody who has a voice or a role at the zoo, what does that say, right? We need to think critically about the types of messages that we are sending. So this is a really complex issue. I only barely touched on a couple of things today, right? And addressing this is going to take time, it's going to take effort, and it is going to take a multifaceted approach. But if there's one thing that I could leave you with today, it would be to say that every single one of us, no matter what role you have at your institution, can play a role as an advocate for equity, diversity, and inclusion, even if that is just asking a question at a staff meeting, right? All of us have something that we can do. And also, not only can we do it, you should. So, I'm a white person. I'm a white woman working in education. I have never struggled to see myself represented in my field. But I am better at my job when I seek out, learn from, and incorporate diverse voices and perspectives in my work, and my students and our visitors are better off for it. I guarantee the same will be true for you, and the same is true for our entire industry. So, my challenge to you is think about how you can be a voice for equity, diversity, and inclusion. What can you do? And let's talk. Let's keep this conversation going, because it's going to take all of us together to do it. Thanks.
We have time for one or two questions.
Oh, I oh, yes.
Okay, so this is mostly just methodology question.
Yeah.
So how did you handle signs that are either like very sun faded, which happens a lot at zoos, right?
Yeah.
Or featuring people that weren't very easily categorized, just objectively.
Yeah.
White
So,
and white.
In general, I wouldn't say that sun fading was something that I ran into, at least in terms of signs where like there were actually people on it and I was trying to categorize them. There were times that I looked at signs that it was a little bit hard to tell if somebody was white or non-white, because it's not totally subjective, right? But what I ultimately decided was like, well, the purpose isn't to like parse the definition of what whiteness is, but to think about who would reasonably see themselves represented on a sign. So if I kind of glanced at it and I was like, I'm pretty sure that person's white, or like my instinct says that person's white. Occasionally I would like show something, like show a picture of a sign to someone and be like, hey, does that look like a white person to you? And they were like, yeah, it is. So yeah, it was a little bit subjective, but I was thinking about like, what are you seeing, right? Like knowing that I don't know what our personal background is.
I'm getting my steps. I wasn't Zumba this week.
Sorry, I'm not Caesar. Did you notice a correlation between, as the years have gone by and maybe there might be an increase in diversity in the employees, are you seeing more pictures at all with more diversity?
That's a good question. I would say it's hard for me to know from the data that I have, because I looked at 4 years of ACA pizzazz reels, and I can tell you that in the last 4 years there was no significant like trend that I could show. Like there were years that it was like, right. And then with YouTube videos, I was looking at, what I did was I looked at the 5 most recent videos, so like what would someone most likely see if they just clicked on that zoo's YouTube page. And then I looked at the 5 most viewed videos to see like what have the most people actually seen. The 5 most viewed videos tended to be older, but they also tended to be like the boob videos, right? Like pictures of baby animals and stuff like that. So I don't know. It would be interesting, I think, to look. I think websites is probably the one where you'd be able to see the most difference, because as you update websites and you update pictures, you'd be able to see like from year over year, are we seeing more?
Thank you so much. So now we are going to be switching maybe a more aquatic on this rainy day. So Suzanne's now going to talk about beluga whales.
Thank you. So my name is Suzanne, and I am a summer of 2019 Global Field Program graduate. And thank you. And I actually grew up here in the Cincinnati, northern Kentucky area. I grew up encountering animals from all over the world right here at the Cincinnati Zoo. So how did I wind up in Alaska saving whales? I landed there 10 years ago, traveling to the last frontier, seeking what anybody who goes there, I think, looks for: wilderness adventure. And speaking of adventure, here I am in Thailand a year before I began my master's journey, enjoying bath time with a rescued elephant. And I'm pretty sure this is the exact moment I decided I wanted to devote my life to wildlife conservation. Back in Alaska, I got my first conservation job and participated in the reintroduction of wood bison back into the wild for the first time in 100 years. And as part of this effort, I got to experience a collaborative field project with a variety of stakeholders and organizations, including Native communities. And I decided when I entered the Global Field Program that I wanted to devote my master plan to endangered species recovery strategies. So the area of Alaska where I'm currently based, and I've been based since I've been in the Dragonfly program in South Central Alaska, is called Cook Inlet, which is a large glacial watershed area. And that star there represents the small little ski town where I currently live that is actually, thank you, climate change, as warm and rainy as it is here today. That star also represents the city of Anchorage as well, which is Alaska's largest city. And Cook Inlet, despite being one of the most densely populated regions of Alaska, is also one of the most unique. We're surrounded by active volcanoes, we have 30-foot tidal fluctuations, and we have one of the longest waves in the world that you see here, called a war tide, that people actually surf regularly. So one of my favorite features of living in this area is actually a highway that goes from Anchorage to the town that I live in. And it's one of the most busiest highways in Alaska, and also one of the most beautiful. And it also parallels critical habitat for a pretty important animal, beluga whales. So this area is in fact one of only a few places in the entire world where you can easily see and get up close and personal with wild belugas from the road. This beluga population is named after Cook Inlet, and because they reside there year-round, exclusively isolated from other beluga populations. They also really hug the coastline and nearshore areas seasonally during the spring and fall, chasing anadromous fish runs like salmon, and that brings them in closer contact with people. But these belugas are also critically endangered. They're some of the most endangered belugas in the entire world, in fact. They currently number only 328 individuals and are listed under the Endangered Species Act. So while it's not currently known what is contributing to their decline, it is known that there are a variety of human threats that are preventing the recovery. Anything from underwater noise to pollution to habitat degradation, and of course climate change. So despite, as I lived in this area and got to know the people there as well and make friends in the community, I started realizing that despite living so close to this population of belugas and having the opportunity to see them, many residents actually don't know that much about them. They don't know a lot about their detailed behavioral patterns, best times to see them, and where. So I really realized that there was a gap. People really value these whales. They like to see them. They realize that they're declining, but I realized there was this disconnect between that valuation and the knowledge of their conservation and participation in their recovery. So I decided to focus my master's work instead of on, say, gorillas, thank you to my advisor for directing me on that one, on this population of beluga whales. So I started, as part of the community engagement lab, I banded together with the local community school and started using community engagement as a way to bridge that gap that I talked about between values and participation. I also, in 2017, designed and implemented a field project along the banks of a glacial river in my area. And it was a full collaboration that I undertook with a variety of organizations. And that river is also on the only forest in the United States, national forest, that has beluga whales. As part of this project, we monitored both boating and beluga activity because boating is a common means of transportation on this river for fishing during salmon season. One of the cool collaborations that I made as part of this project was taking high-res photos of whales and sharing them with researchers that use those photos to identify individual whales. And a really rewarding collaboration was working with and engaging the boating community on the river as well. So engaging the boaters and actually producing knowledge of beluga activity on the river, engaging their awareness of beluga activity on the river, and having them actually help in the creation of new signage that encourages beluga-friendly boating practices. So the community engagement with the boaters and collaboration were really the most rewarding aspects of that research for me. And as I continued my work with these belugas and in Dragonfly, the global field program, I realized there were still pieces of the conservation puzzle that weren't being connected. Specifically, how community could be involved on a grander scale. And that really needed to be connected at the time as it turned and belugas were going to be safe from extinction. So in 2017, I launched a nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit called Beluga Whale Alliance that really was devoted to harnessing the visibility of the cook-inlet population and their status near Alaska's largest human center. Harness that visibility for implementing recovery actions. And as our flagship project in 2018 and as my leadership challenge in the Global Field Program, we launched as BWA a citizen science interpretation project along the shores of Cook Inlet. And this project, really the objectives were to engage community members directly in conservation of the whales, as well as collect and obtain baseline data on their habitat use in this area, focusing specifically on areas where they're easily visible and where they encounter human threats, like boating. And this was a really good opportunity for me to expand my collaborative network. So we got by on some in-kind donations, some crowdsourced funding, our strategic collaborations to fund the project in its pilot season. And we also utilized funds, proceeds from a clothing partnership we developed. We banded together with local community organizations to host orientations and train our citizen scientists and interpreters. And we worked, a really key collaboration for us too was working with the NOAA Fisheries, the National Marine Fisheries Service who manages the whales, to create a protocol, data sheets, and really ensure that our project's design and implementation directly supported beluga recovery actions. We also brought on a project coordinator from Oregon, fresh out of college, who got great project leadership experience and served as an interface with us with volunteers. And we got folks out helping us collect scientific data and opportunistic beluga sightings. The group was, what they were doing, if they were vocalizing, splashing around, feeding, the age classes of the individual whales. Belugas are not all white, babies are actually gray, for instance, and juveniles as well. And community members from feedback we received, they really enjoyed learning the prime times and locations to see belugas as well. So even when visibility was not so great, when the environmental conditions were not so great, people still seem to have a really good time getting out and enjoying the environment. We also pilot ran a two-way Beluga Alerts text messaging service as part of this project, which became really popular and was a real-time way for people to share beluga sightings with each other and for us to share our beluga sightings with the public. And all of that data was then used and shared with our research collaborators in conservation. Also really important to our interpretation wing of the project was informing people what to do if they see a beluga whale in distress. So strandings can be fairly common in this area because of the tidal fluctuations, for instance. And also letting people know what harassment means. A lot of people didn't know that, for instance, if you're boating in a river with belugas, if you approach that whale, it actually constitutes illegal harassment. And probably my favorite site that we had, viewing location and interpretation location as part of this pilot project, was at the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center, which was a new partner for us. This was actually where I worked when I participated in the wood bison reintroduction project, and this is the exact spot that I saw the whales for the first time. We also got to work with the Wildlife Center and create some new signage out at that location about belugas. And our pilot season was, we consider, a success. We logged over 100 hours of volunteer monitoring time. We had over 500 beluga sightings. And we also observed we had some really cool experiences volunteers did. We saw super pods of belugas, of upwards of 80 belugas in a group at a time. And we even caught some cool behaviors like this spy hop of a beluga that quickly went viral on social media. So in 2019, we expanded our collaborations in some exciting new ways. We also got our first grant funding, which is very important, from one of the only national heritage area in Alaska that gets their funding from the National Park Service. And we helped to establish what is now called the Alaska Beluga Monitoring Partnership with a variety of organizations. This helped us to expand our efforts into a region-wide project. We had a variety of sites now, or have a variety of sites now, formal sites around Cook Inlet. And this also helped us to recruit volunteers, expand that network, and increase the rigor of our data too. One of the most important sites we added is the Port of Anchorage here, which is a very important site because next year it will be undergoing an expansion. So NOAA Fisheries really needed some key data on beluga habitat use in that area to use for their endangered species actions and consultations. NOAA Fisheries also, as part of their role in the partnership, funded a project coordinator position, and this coordinator was really key in helping liaise between the different partners to help us establish guidelines for the partnership and to really help us increase the rigor of our methods. So we had over 150 volunteers as part of the partnership sign up this year in 2019, and we're active with us monitoring belugas. As part of the partnership, we all banded together to create outreach materials and to host a handful of trainings around the region where folks learn how to identify belugas and collect data. And then we got most of those volunteers actually out in the field with us. We logged over 600 hours of monitoring data this year. We had over 1,000 beluga sightings. And here are the faces of some of our volunteers, most of whom were residents of the general area around Anchorage, including his grandmother and member of an Alaska Native community. We have this computer technician who logged dozens of hours with his wife contributing to the project. We have this lively spirit who kept us smiling even on the rainy days, an environmental advocate, a professional beluga biologist who has flown surveys in the Arctic over pods of hundreds of belugas. And even, I was very excited to welcome a retired U.S. Fish and Wildlife Endangered Species Program Director and her husband, who is wheelchair bound. It was a great activity for them to participate together. So our volunteers took initiative to create interpretation materials. They brought their friends and family out with them, even their Tinder dates. They really enjoyed, yes, they really enjoyed getting to meet folks from all over the state of Alaska, but even all over the world, including Germany, Japan, Egypt, Switzerland. And we also, this year, started to include children as our collaborators. So we worked with some of our existing partners here to bring a class of 75 third graders out to the Alaska Wildlife Center to see beluga whales, most of them seeing beluga whales for the first time. We'll be able to continue this educational programming, thankfully, this year with some funding that we've received from funds set up from Alaskan families who have lost their children. And these funds are in honor of the wildlife and science that their children cared for and held dear. So what do we know what success? How do we know what success looks like? For these guys, these belugas, time is of the essence. So we really need to know how well we're doing and if we're doing things right. The data that our volunteers have collected is actively being used in conservation and management. We're getting word of our efforts is being shared on national media outlets at international conferences. They're even written about in a 2019 federal report to Congress. But I think our success is best shown through the voices of our volunteers. So this is a board member here of our organization who has actively led our citizen science and interpretation project. We're finding that our volunteers are feeling empowered and that their work and ideas are valuable and that this experience is beneficial and rewarding to them personally. We're also finding that our volunteers are connecting with each other and with belugas, of course, but also with the place in which they are from, our part. And probably one of the success of our collaborative efforts to me has been BWA's role in co-hosting the now annual Cook at the Belugas Count, which is an annual citizen science festival and celebration that is put on by a variety of organizations. You guys probably recognize some of the logos there, Zoo and Aquaria that we now work with. And we had over 2,000 folks the last few years attend this event to help us count whales and promote pride and stewardship. And it was really exciting to have two representatives from the Georgia and Shedd aquariums visit our viewing site this year and see wild beluga whales for the first time. So going forward, really hope to expand our collaborative network and really deepen public participation in the project. Going forward to thinking of collaboration, I think when I was on at my field project, or field course in Belize, and every night we would see the leafcutter ants walk across the pathway. And it made me think of, it's the best example I can think of for collaboration. So we're really hoping to continue adhering to the eco-leadership paradigm that prioritizes community, diversity, and collaboration, community, diversity, and adaptation. So as a leader of this organization, and being in Project Dragonfly, I've really valued getting to take what I've learned during my field courses from the in-country partners who are working to conserve species around the world and apply it locally in my own region where I'm based. I don't think it'll ever get old experiencing seeing the beluga whale or something for the first time, or having community members come up when I'm at a local cafe and thank us for the work that we're doing. So hopefully we'll be able to turn this into a long-term project and really harness the overwhelming amount of public support that we have for this cause and for this species to help turn the tide and save this population of belugas from extinction. So I just want to thank Miami University, Project Dragonfly, all of our collaborators and volunteers, our board members, some of whom are in the audience today, and family and friends who support me as well.
We unfortunately don't have time for questions right now, so hold those questions. And last, but certainly, we have Lisa, so we're going from the aquatic realm to the terrestrial realm for our last talk.
Hello. It's working. So I have an animal on the first. That's a good check. And one thing I learned in graduate school is the more long and convoluted your title, the more impressive your study must be. So just enjoy. So if you really want to boil this down, we took some cheetahs, we released them, we looked at what they ate, and then we wrote 15 pages about it. So my master plan is reintroducing wildlife into native African landscapes. What that means is Africa is about to double its population to 1.5 billion in the next 20 years, making it the fastest growing population on Earth. What that means is then the encroachment in the wildlife and habitats become much more challenging to maintain. So one of the trends in Africa is to create protected areas where they unfortunately have to be fenced, and then rebuilding habitats and then reintroducing animals into the wild so that they can live on in their sort of natural habitats. So that is something that I just love and I want to do with my life. And I've been lucky enough with Project Dragonfly to have the flexibility to use my student status to create volunteer opportunities for myself in Africa. And I've been to 5 countries and participated in elephant translocation, darting black rhinos, taking care of cheetahs, habituating mountain gorillas, and I got to walk with a penguin and hold that penguin. That was pretty cool. It's kind of like holding a raw archer. But anyway, so how did my paper happen? I did an internship at Cheetah Conservation Fund in Namibia, and then afterwards I visited Africat Foundation, which is another big cat conservation organization in Namibia, a free cat, and their tourism arm is Okajima Wildlife Reserve. I asked to meet with their head researcher, which is Dr. Sarah Edwards, and asked if she had any research collaborations that she was interested in doing. She took me up on it. She had an idea for a paper, so she sent me all of her data that she had and gave me the direction, and I wrote the paper. And so it's been a really awesome collaboration with her that came because of being a student at Project Dragonfly. And it was really exciting, but now I also understand why it takes so long to get something published and so long to do a PhD. So there we go. Now on to the project. First, just geographically, Namibia is in southern Africa. It's largely desert, so it's actually the second lowest population density in the world behind Mongolia. There's only 2 million people in all of Namibia. And most of their, 70% of their population is sustained through domestic and game farming lifestyle and game. So, where did the captive cheetahs come from? A lot of them are from illegal pets. Namibia outlawed pet cheetahs a few years ago, so they had to bring in all the ones that were pets. There's also the illegal wildlife pet trade, which is very big in the Middle East, taking big cats to the Middle East so guys can put them in Rolls Royces and take pictures. And then the third is orphaned baby cheetahs when their moms were killed by whatever reason. So those are brought into captivity. And the issue is there's a lot of debate on whether they can ever learn to hunt and survive self-sustainably in the wild, because it's believed that they learn most of their hunting skills from their mom in the first year or two of life. So there's some debate about that. Other reasons that it's difficult to release them in the wild is they're put in artificial coalitions. They have some habituation to humans, which makes them on farmlands wander up closer to people where they get killed. And also when they're in enclosures, they're not exposed to predators that could kill them because they're not in the top order of the predator guild. So they are more easily killed because they're not as fearful as they need to be. And there's very little research on captive and released cheetah data. It's all wild cheetah data, so we really don't know. So our research question is, how does hunting behavior of captive raised cheetahs compare to wild cheetahs? Why does it matter? The survival rate of released cheetahs is extremely low, beyond 1 year. They usually don't last more than a year in the wild. So by understanding their behavior when they're released, we can select better release sites that have the right prey base and maybe predator density to give them an advantage. Creating the optimal coalitions to release them, because sometimes they can be released in coalitions. And also improve the pre-release training, hunting training, etc., and just better manage their coexistence once they are back into the wild. So the data collection was collected in Okajima Reserve, which is Africat's reserve, which is a pretty large area, but it was only over 15 months, and it was just based on sightings from rangers and guides. So it wasn't extremely robust. And we only had a pretty small sample of 7 cheetahs and just a few configurations of coalitions and solitary animals. Obviously, there's a lot of limitations with this data because it was existing data that wasn't collected specifically for this purpose. And we had very limited population estimates of the prey base in Okajima that was done via an aerial survey, which can only capture larger animals. And a lot of cheetahs eat a lot of smaller animals, so we don't really know the density of those animals. Obviously, a small sample size, small time frame, and the monitoring was a little inconsistent. But the positive is it gives some directional ideas of where to do future research. So here's the prey selections. In order to be able to compare with existing data, we separated the prey into 3 categories, small, medium, and large. And you can see this kind of the breakdown. and released cheetahs selected medium-sized prey most often. The ubiquitous impala, which is the white antelope that's in every country in Africa, is the one that they prefer to eat. Which is interesting because in captivity they most often eat donkey meat. So you're just kind of wondering, like, what is their taste for meat? Is it different than in the wild? So mainly medium prey. Large prey is difficult because it's just too big for them. So then we looked at prey diversity. They ate 14 different species. This is a Shannon Diversity Index, which is a common test used to determine the diversity of prey. And you can see that the all kills is the orange, and all of the configurations of coalitions have more prey diversity than the solitary cheetahs. Then we also looked at the abundance of the prey within the reserve. So the blue is the data that we did have on population density of prey within Okanagan, and the red is the percentage of each species that was eaten by the cheetahs. The one outlier is the gemsbok, which is the oryx, same thing. Oryx are everywhere in Namibia, but they're also very large and huge horns, so they're not really ideal prey for cheetah, so that's likely why they avoided those. But the rest of the pattern seems to sort of follow the species abundance, which leads us to believe that they go on opportunity and abundance, making prey selections. So some key takeaways. I do want to do a disclaimer. There was supplemental feeding of the cheetahs in the initial couple of months of their release, but by the end of the study, they were self-sustaining in their hunting. So they weren't, self-sustaining on day one, but they all got there, which is good to know. So what that does teach us is that they can successfully hunt in the wild and save themselves. They do medium-sized prey, which is a similar size as wild counterparts. They do size abundance, which is very similar to wild counterparts. And I think it's better to release them in coalitions where they have a higher survival rate because they can be adaptable to a broader range of circumstances in prey, as we saw from the diversity. And they do cooperative hunting, and that also helps them with surviving with each other, not having their prey stolen, and is better survival chances. So for future research, I think we really need to look into the different demographics of how you pair cheetahs to release I didn't get to talk about this for only 7 minutes, but the size difference between males and females is about 25%, to see if there is a big difference between the prey that the larger males versus the smaller females catch, and what types of coalitions work best, whether it's mixed sex, what size, 2, 3, 4, work best in the wild, and then how they can adapt to predators and prey within their habitat released. So that is it. I have no citations because I didn't do them. But you can see them in my portfolio where the full paper exists for the question. And I took all the pictures, that's why I didn't cite them.
So we won't take off on your side. We're going to invite all of our speakers up right now for a quick open discussion and questions. They're walking up. A big round of applause. Any of you slept in the past 2.5 years?
Yeah. Back to the eyes.
Congratulations. So any questions for our...
I can speak loud.
Go ahead, John.
Okay, so Lisa, I have a question for you. For the cheetahs that were captive raised and then released back into the wild, what were the operant conditioning steps? Did you do anything to train them before they were released? Was it a hard release? Was it a soft? I'm just curious about the training behind what you did.
From my understanding, because I wasn't on site to do the actual pre-release training, is in captivity they live in rather large enclosures within Okanagan, so that would be sort of considered the soft thing. And then oftentimes, at CCF, I know a little bit more how they do it. is they'll move them to enclosures where prey can kind of get in and out, because you're not allowed to put live prey into an enclosure and let them go. I don't think you can do that at zoos either. but that way, if the prey can escape, they get some practice hunting some of the smaller prey. And then they're just more heavily monitored when they're first released. I guess the hard release is that they're in a fence preserve. And the fence is, they can't penetrate the fence. So that keeps them in. But actually the sad thing of what happened is they had to bring all of the cheetahs back into captivity at Okajima because they have like a crazy high leopard density in that park. It's higher than anywhere in Namibia by 5 times. And the leopards were killing them. So they decided and this is why it's more important to figure out release sites for cheetahs, because like over 80% of cheetahs don't live on protected areas in Namibia because the ranges are too big and they just roam farmlands. And that's really the future of where they need to be. So we just have to figure out how to make that happen. And education next time. It's in the paper.
Any other questions? Yeah, just place the running to Zach.
My question is for Melinda. You talked a little bit about how white individuals were more common in all animal roles, and then you had a caveat after that that said except in non-animal roles where that was different. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there was one exception to that, whereas, so I was looking at 3 different media types. On websites, there was the only place where there was no significant difference between white and non-white representation was in non-animal or mission-related roles. So representation was more equal for jobs like security, food service, visitor services, facilities maintenance, things like that.
Hi, this question is for Suzanne. Was NOAA actually doing some way to identify individuals of the belugas? Were they at that level of research?
Yes, so throughout the span of the river project that I did and then the citizen science monitoring we've been doing, we have been collaborating with the NOAA-funded researchers, independent researchers, called the Cook and the Beluga Photo ID Project. And they actually take high-resolution photographs of the whales and look at their markings that are created from like sloughing their skin up against rocks or interacting with each other or predation or even boat collisions or satellite tagging. And can I identify belugas that way?
Thank you.
I think we had a question in the front.
This question is for Chris. So when you were doing your research on social media, you were measuring engagement and you used the likes and comments and probably resharing and everything. Do you know if there's any data out there that looks at or tries to measure engagement in terms of like whether people actually retain any information from social media, or was that something you looked into at all?
I looked into it a little. There isn't much that I could find, at least, and that's one of the hardest things when I work with our education department, trying to figure out even just visitors coming into our locations. Are they going home and is the information they're receiving from us causing any change? And social media-wise, we have the same struggle. Got to figure out some studies where we can actually track the people long-term to see if there's any changes. But currently, I could not find any research that was really strong to give any indication of what happens a day, a week, whatever after they see those posts, unfortunately. So maybe you could do a project on that.
So for the sake of time, we are going to hold the rest of the questions. And so seek out our great speakers throughout the rest of the afternoon and continue these conversations. We have to give them another round of applause. And I stole this from a student. This is one of the foundations, but I think it's really important. We saw amazing work, and sometimes it's easy to think, oh, I can't do that. But really, these research questions and getting out in your own community, you can all do that. And so I would hope these talks inspired you to go out, think about your assignments that are coming up. I think we're going to change the requirement for LSI that now you have to start a 501c. So this is just the beginning. So we have great animal ambassadors that are going to be in the hallways for a little bit. You can see in this room and outside. We have wonderful poster presentations, so find the people that have done these studies and talk to them, engage in them, read them. And then we have 2 breakout sessions. And let me look at my clock. Let's say that Reflections on Meditation in Thailand will start at 2 o'clock now. Does that work for everyone? I just made an executive order. Give me a microphone, I think I run the place. So that's just out. And then we'll push back the next one till 3 o'clock. And that's on, you want to hear some other people talk. So thank you very much. And go enjoy.
Thank you. First of all, big round of applause for Keith. I also want to make one comment on the presentations, which I thought was so cool, just how different they are, right? And how amazing it is that within that group, so if you wanted to start a conservation project or an education project, you needed to know about social media, you needed to know about diversity. Everybody is represented. I mean, it really does, that synergy, I think, is really one amazing piece of community. And listening to the voice of all of that really was reflected. So thank you, everybody who taught. And I also want to give a shout out to the Cincinnati Zoo. Big round of applause. Dan March, Dave Denicky, Dane Maynard, who are very influential from the very early days of the project, and lots of things that also were set up for this stuff. That's all I